Right, so I've talked a lot about the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in recent vids, given the obvious court case there with South Africa versus Israel. But The Hague is, of course, also home to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, whose job it is to prosecute individuals for international crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Now, given the high profile of that ICJ case and other filings at the ICJ against other nations now for aiding and abetting in Israel's genocide of Palestine, it has been very noticeable, and becoming ever more so, there have been absolutely zero prosecutions brought to the ICC in conjunction with what Israel and supporting countries have been doing. Not one. Yet just to rub salt in that particular wound further, the ICC have recently issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, yet none has been issued for Benjamin Netanyahu, despite the number of civilian deaths in the Gaza Strip far outweighing those lost in Russia's war with Ukraine. So what gives? Right, so the International Criminal Court have decreed that Vladimir Putin is an international criminal and issued an arrest warrant for him. Yet still not one single person has had a prosecution mounted against them in relation to what is happening in Gaza at the hands of the Israeli regime, or in fact going back further than that. This matters because the ICJ has made an interim ruling, as we all know, that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in Gaza. The case being judged on the merits of the evidence will take a long time to go through, but despite that, nobody has been brought to The Hague before the ICC in relation to what we know, what we suspect, what is plausible so far, and that is beginning to look rather ridiculous. It's a farce, especially in light of the blatant comments that have come from several members of the Israeli government, for example, and the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, that provided damning evidence as part of that ICJ prosecution brought by South Africa. And this is even more ridiculous when you consider that the ICC's prosecutor has said that its investigation into the issues in the state of Palestine are ongoing, and that extends to the escalation of hostilities and violence since the attacks that took place on 7th of October 2023. Good grief, if your ongoing investigation garnered any less in the way of results, you'd be going backwards. 4 months on, literally nothing has happened in the ICC in relation to Israel and Palestine. It's crazy. Let's come back to that prosecutor, though, because the crux of this issue appears to be being built around him. This is a chap called Karim Khan, and he's courted controversy for some time right now, right back to how he was even elected to the post he's got in the first place. The ICC adapted a new process to select their prosecutor last time around, you see. A committee that was delegated this responsibility, ultimately meaning fewer people were concerned with sorting this out, if you like. It went badly as a result. A shortlist was produced. Khan, who was the UK's nomination, wasn't on it. Nation states complained about the lack of choice and poor vetting process, having put forward relatively inexperienced candidates, so selection got reopened and Khan was eventually chosen after several rounds of voting. Civil rights groups complained about poor vetting as well, not to mention serious allegations levelled at several of the candidates. The whole process was an absolute mess. The ICC prosecutor holds their post for a 9-year term. Karim Khan was elected in 2021, so he's there until 2030. In and of itself, this doesn't add anything to this argument that the ICC is in any way compromised. It was a lash-up process electing their latest prosecutor, but that doesn't explain why said prosecutor doesn't seem keen to prosecute when it comes to Israel and Palestine. Except that he is when he wants to be. Let's have a better look at this guy. Khan was the UN Assistant Secretary General at the time of his appointment to the ICC. He was also head of the UN investigative team to promote accountability for Daesh/ISIL crimes, UNITAD. He's also a KC, King's Counsel. Now, as I said before, he was the UK nomination. He was the Tory government's choice. And at that point, it was, of course, the batshit government of Boris Johnson. This was covered by The Economist. The first paragraph of this article does really sort of imply how things may have ended up panning out. It read, Boris Johnson's government was cock-a-hoop. The election on February 12th of Karim Khan, a British barrister, as chief prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, ICC, in The Hague, was surely a sign that Britain still had diplomatic heft post-Brexit. Mr. Khan's appointment would be pivotal in ensuring we hold those responsible for the most heinous crimes to account, beamed Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary. Others say Mr. Khan's appointment is less a diplomatic coup for Britain than for Kenya, whose government has done so much damage to the ICC's credibility. As a result, some fret that Mr. Khan may not be the champion of the downtrodden the post demands. Now, I'm not paying too much attention to the Kenya bit. Khan had defended Kenyan President William Ruto against crimes against humanity previously, hence that remark. He recused himself from any cases at the ICC involving Kenya. However, it does put a cloud over his head in light of what he might choose to prioritise. And perhaps crimes against humanity, fighting for the little guy, as he once defended somebody over who had been accused of such things, aren't necessarily it. And with no action regarding Israeli individuals on this front so far forthcoming, that cloud has grown ever darker. It might get positively thunderous yet. There's more to come. So the Tories love him. Could he be compromised because of that? Dominic Raab's then Foreign Office reported Khan's appointment as being one of the key moments of 2020-2021 for them. Now, as I said a moment ago, he can act quickly when it suits him, and what suits him might appear to be what the Tory government want from him. Here's an excerpt from Declassified UK's coverage of Khan. With Khan as prosecutor, the ICC has demonstrated it can act quickly when it needs to. In February 2022, for example, as Russia invaded Ukraine, Khan announced the ICC had opened an investigation into alleged Russian war crimes. In September 2022, Khan met then Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and Ukrainian Prosecutor General Andriy Kostin in regard to the situation in Ukraine. A month later, Cleverly met Khan again to discuss further how the UK led 42 other countries in expediting an investigation into the situation in Ukraine. 5 months later, in March 2023, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, you can argue in one respect, well, we're only 4 months into what is happening in Gaza. It took 5 months to issue an arrest warrant for Putin, but I'd also point out this business in Gaza didn't begin on October 7th either. Also, there's absolutely no sign anything is in the works towards anybody being prosecuted from Israel or in the Israeli government in relation to what's going on in Israel and Palestine. It's just that the eyes of the world got opened in the aftermath of October 7th, but still, nothing is happening. Yet at the behest of the Tories, Khan appears to move a bit quicker. Certainly that is what it looks like. Their candidate for ICC prosecutor gets elected, seems to jump when the Tories ask him to. It's how it appears, it's how it comes across. That cloud over his head is rumbling a little bit now. Short digression for a moment though. There's another Tory MP called Nick Gibb. His brother became the head of news at the BBC, Robbie Gibb, before going on to be Theresa May's Director of Communications and then returned to the BBC to sit on its board. And the BBC, of course, is viewed widely as being a Tory mouthpiece, isn't it? This kind of gives an illustration as to why that might be with these Tory links. Now, this is relevant. I bring this up as an example because if the BBC can be considered compromised by the Tories stuffing more Tories into its upper echelons, can the same be said of Karim Khan? I use this brother analogy on purpose because Karim Khan's brother is the disgraced former Tory MP for Wakefield, Imran Ahmad Khan, who resigned as MP following his conviction for sexual assault. Tory leanings are strong here in this instance as well, aren't they? There could be more to this, though. The ICC is funded by nation-states of the UN, just as the ICJ is. And one of the larger contributors to the running of the ICC just happens to be the UK. Of the ICC's £160 million annual running budget, the UK is paid getting on for 10% of that, a little bit less. Adding more fuel to that particular fire is that just after he took up his post, Khan made a major change at the ICC, and that he went to the UN Security Council and said his office would now only take cases referred to it by the Security Council itself. All other cases, no matter where they came from, would be held up for review. Of course, what that has meant is that everything from Palestine, and in relation to Israel and Palestine, is having to go through that indeterminately long review process now. Cases from Afghanistan are also ending up in that pile. You have to remember that with the UK and US as permanent members of the UN Security Council, they'll never sanction any investigations for the ICC from there. That was Khan's doing, but for what reason? Why did he arbitrarily make that choice? It's only harmed the ICC's reputation and its ability to hold certain nations to account, because allied nations on the Security Council can now effectively delay or veto ICC investigations for whatever length of time. There's no way of expediting them. It's very hard to believe that this was anything other than politically motivated. Khan, of course, could choose to pick up the cases relating to Palestine at any time. He has that discretion. But his changes appear to mean that he has an excuse to not do that. Such is the disgust at Khan in Palestine that on a visit to the area last December, he's been there. Human rights groups in the West Bank refused to meet him, accusing him of favouring Israeli accusations of rights abuses over long-standing Palestinian charges. The anger at the ICC's seeming indifference and slowness to act seems completely justifiable to me, and that slowness to act is intentional at that. The argument that the ICC is politically compromised does on the face of it appear to have some weight to it. With so much attention fixated on the ICJ though, and big nation versus nation court cases, you have to remember that individuals like Netanyahu won't get a day in court before the ICJ. It's not in their remit. It is in the remit of the ICC. It is the ICC we need for that. And frankly, with the prosecutor in charge there, who can quickly move against Putin, but is positively glacial in his actions connected with the Gaza genocide, these accusations of not being independent and impartial will probably only grow. However, at least things are moving at the ICJ, as South Africa now prepared to take the US and the UK to the Hague. What could be the consequences of that, I wonder? Well, once that gets underway, I don't doubt for one moment the pressure on Karim Khan will keep on building, and his apparent inaction will become more and more intolerable to more and more people. You should watch this video here next to learn all about the details of this South Africa versus US and UK case, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.